Hello everyone, Troy Coe from Reality Defense Training again. Once again, I've given the internet way too much credit. The previous video on striking with the jabs and crosses and the dismantling of boxing, we mentioned the difference in how we strike and how they strike. And somebody said, oh, your elbow's coming out on a strike. And the question we have for them is it the first strike or the second strike? Because in the first strike, the elbow is not coming out. And it's not really even an issue on the second strike or on the first strike if done correctly. Now, in reality defense training, we have economy strikes and power strikes of every technique. So jabs, crosses, hooks, uppercuts, things like that. A power version and an economy version. Economy is an efficient, non-telegraphic version, and the power version, of course, is just much more powerful with a load and such. Mainly when we do teaching that to people, we are really just developing human potential. We don't expect people to actually use these strikes in real life, but there's something that happens in between once you learn these that is applicable. And we'll probably do a video series on that eventually as well. But with an economy strike, there's three components you need to have: speed, non-telegraphic action, and sight alignment when possible. Now, speed, as we define, is the rate at which you think, move, and react. So you may not be the fastest moving person, but perception has to play a role in that. So if you can make something harder to see, it will be perceptibly harder to see and therefore perceptibly faster. So speed is extremely important, and kind of use what we call the bullet analogy. Everyone knows how bullets work. If I take the projectile, the actual bullet itself, and I throw it at somebody as hard as I can, and let's say for argument's sake, it's going to hit with the tip like it would if I shot it at someone. It's going to bounce off of someone's chest and fall on the ground. But if I put that in a firearm, in a loaded cartridge, and I shoot somebody, that's when you get a hole blown in someone's chest. The only difference is the speed. I mean, the weight of the bullet was the same, the shape of the bullet was the same. So the faster your hand moves, the more power it's going to have. Now, I'm not trying to state that we punch as hard as a bullet has, as far as foot-pounds of pressure, but the analogy is still sound. The faster my fist moves, the harder it will hit. Something that we have that bullets do not have, and that is leverage. And something that a bullet has that we do not have, which is velocity. There's a lot of velocity. Now, so speed is number one. Number two is non-telegraphic action. Now, telegraphic action is some type of a signal that tells your opponent you're getting ready to do something, or they're getting ready to do something to you, or you to them. There's three ways that this can occur. There's weapon withdrawal, which is essentially loading the hand. So whether it's pulling it back, dipping it, some type of a circular action where you're dipping the hand before you throw a hook or something, that is extremely easy to see. Well, not everyone knows what that means and what to do with it, but if you do know what to do with it, it's a huge tell. Body movement. This is essentially someone putting a lot of shoulder into their action or actually moving their body prior to them moving their hand. This is also telegraphic. And you can get a combination of these things, which is what you see a lot of boxers do. Unfortunately, they may be standing here like this. What they'll do is they'll throw a lot of shoulder and they'll dip that hand and whip that hand out there like that, thinking that they're getting a lot of power out of it when all it does is just make for a sloppy punch. And then number three here on the telegraphic action is expressive. Now, everyone's aware of this. Most people disregard it. Some people make faces. Quit making faces. They make noises. Quit making noises. Sometimes a person will be breathing heavily, and right before they get ready to attack, they'll take a big breath and hold it. Now, if you're paying attention to these kind of things, that could be a big tell that an attack is coming. And lastly, sight alignment when possible. So we tried to convey this as much as we can. And if you can imagine someone swinging a baseball bat at you or a staff of some sort, you can see that whole thing coming like an arm. Okay, but if you were to hold that on edge, on the point, and then all you're looking at is the front point of that stick or staff, it's going to be a lot harder to see. So essentially, when you're looking at the way boxers fight with their hands really high, they're showing bone. So when they're punching, this is very, very visible. Versus a sideline position that we're showing here is something along this makes it a lot harder to see. And then if you combine that action with a non-telegraphic action, meaning I'm not loading it or anything like that, it makes it very, very difficult to see. The human eye does not deal with depth perception, judgment at speed as it does seeing circular motions and whatnot. With a power strike, the requirements are speed and leverage. So you notice that speed is the number one component there. So speed is the number one component in reality defense. You want to move fast because that does generate more power. But the human body generates power three ways: locomotion, inclination, and rotation. Now, locomotion, of course, is moving the body. Inclination is leaning. Now, inclination is probably the weakest of the three by itself. But when you add it to a step or add it to a rotation, it really does increase the power quite a bit. Of course, rotation, combatively speaking, is probably the most powerful way the human body generates power. But the most powerful way the human body generates power in general is running. Obviously, you look at football or any sports like that where people are slamming into each other. A lot of energy transfer going on there. But back to this side alignment versus elbow out. Now, the non-telegraphic requirements are less important after the first strike, right? So if I can throw the first strike that's sidelined, non-telegraphic, very difficult to see. One of two things are going to be happening. One, you're either getting hit or you're dealing with it. But either way, if my elbow happens to come out as I'm throwing a strike, it's less important. Now, I want to clarify this. When we throw this rear cross, for example, we don't throw it like this. Okay, I'm getting my body offline so that my forearm is straight. You get a lot more power from a mechanical standpoint on the body. And not really sidelined, but it does align the forearm with the sight if a person's looking at you. And again, after the first strike, the non-telegraphic requirements of the following strikes not quite as important. So elbow coming out is really not that big of a deal. So I don't know why a lot of people are looking at this stuff and all they see is what they think they see and completely neglecting what happens in the first strike. That's why we want to initiate mostly with our lead jab almost all the time, because it's going to be the fastest strike you have. And it's really the only strike we can maintain that side alignment position. So I hope this clarifies some of the questions if there is a question. But keep in mind, guys, for you to punch with crosses and such like that, as we would throw it, the elbow has to come up. It doesn't mean that I'm doing this. Very, very, very visible. And it is, of course, crosses are more telegraphic than jabs, and hooks are more telegraphic than crosses. So that makes sense. Thank you.